We have put a premium on busy work, and we have not put a premium on outcomes. The more time we can spend being creative, the more time that we can spend using our innate abilities, the better the outcome will be ultimately, but the more happier and the more fulfilled we'll be in our work.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Intersect. I'm your host, Cory. Today, we're talking about why work feels so disconnected. And I'm joined by Toby Daniels, who is co-founder of a new collaboration platform, Domain. Toby, welcome to the Intersect.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. Great to be here.
You've built communities for leaders, for builders. You've now built a product. But I see this like superpower, this thing that comes up in conversations when I talk to you and what I see you trying to build, which is what we say we're doing at work, what we're saying work is, and then like how we feel about it. Why does work feel so disconnected? What's happened?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's talk about where we are right now, right? It's 2026. We've spent the last couple of years, I think, adjusting to a new reality brought on by a new technology, which is, I think we would all agree, representing the next big shift, big disruption in terms of like how we work, right? Which of course is generative AI. And it's still very early and we're still adjusting to it. But I think it's fair to say that most of us, most people in general, are completely overwhelmed by what's coming at them. The speed at which this technology is coming at them, being told that you have to like jump in and adopt and upskill and figure out what your role kind of means today, given that like AI is clearly going to have a transformative effect on how we work at the individual level, how organizations are structured, what work even means and represents today and in the future. But like, this isn't the first time that we've had to embrace or encounter or sort of ride the wave of, you know, technological disruption. I think it's really important. I love to sort of get a little nostalgic when we think about technology in the context of work and kind of go back, 30 plus years to sort of the advent of like email. And email, of course, was just, a technology that would make it easier for us to communicate and send messages more instantly, more cost effectively, right? And then let's just like fast forward 30 years, just to give everyone a little bit of context as to kind of like what's happened over that period, right? So email was first, right? And then we, had to start using tools and platforms like LinkedIn, right? And the advent of like social media and mobile. And, LinkedIn, what was that? It represented a kind of a new type of Rolodex, but it also allowed us to like scale our professional connections. It allowed us to connect and communicate with people across our professional network globally, right? And then after that, we saw collaborative technologies like Google Docs, right? And that was sort of in a way a replacement or at least a better alternative to using kind of like, Microsoft Office or Word like on our desktop computers. And then Slack came along, right? Slack, the promise of Slack was like, you're going to need to use email less because you can use Slack to now connect and communicate with your coworkers. So each of those different sort of moments in technological kind of innovation and disruption, we've had to adapt and adjust. And guess what? We're actually pretty good at adapting and adjusting to these new technologies, particularly if they afford us the ability to do things in new and potentially sort of more efficient ways. But today, despite all of that technology, in our opinion at least, work has never felt more disconnected. And I think AI in particular sort of is forcing us to do two things. One is forcing us to work in isolation. And then, AI is also trying to automate us, right? We hear it all the time. Automation, efficiency. What can you automate in your job? How can organizations automate more so that we can kind of, basically reduce our workforce by 30%. And so when you factor all of these things in, that work feels disconnected, that we're working across all these different tools and applications and platforms, and we're also feeling isolated in our work as we start to kind of use and embrace all these tools that just want us to be working in these different tools and environments. I think the conclusion, at least that we've come to, is that work kind of sucks. And that's like a big problem.
I listen to all the platforms you do. I mean, I know these platforms intimately, of course, like story of my career, of all of our careers, like just these different things. And we adapt quite well, but it is put together. That is a collective of stress and things that don't necessarily go together, but you must make work all together in this like cacophony. It sounds very noisy. It sounds very, yeah, it sounds like it does suck.
It's not just noisy. It is actually like inefficient. I mean, just think about like your
Inefficient.
average day, right? You might be working in Slack, on Zoom, in email, on Signal, in WhatsApp. You're text messaging people, right? You're working across all these different sort of communication and productivity tools and applications. And those conversations, that data, the context related to your work is all over the place, like fragmented, fractured, distributed all over the place, right? There's no way currently of bringing all of that together. And that's where we see a kind of a huge white space opportunity. And obviously, what we're looking to do with Domain is to kind of impact and address that. But like, I think probably more philosophically, we're also trying to figure out how we can make work feel fun and joyful, as well as like productive and efficient.
Okay, I like this optimism. Tell me about Domain. What have you built?
Domain, put simply, is a collaboration platform powered by AI that connects your work to your network. So think about any specific thing that you are working on at the moment. Let me give it a very specific example of something that we're working on. So naturally, we are sort of, eaters of our own dog food. So we're building Domain as a business on the Domain platform, right? So when it comes to a really high stakes thing that we're working on at any given time, like, for example, the product itself, right? The product experience. So we have a domain that we set up that we call the domain product experience domain, right? And first of all, the person who owns that domain like basically jumps in and starts to have like an initial interaction with Doma, the agent. And Doma's job in that context is to capture as much information about what it is you're working on.
Doma is your AI.
Doma is our AI. It's one of multiple AIs that exist within the platform, each of which sort of serves a different role or function depending on like what it is you're trying to do at any given time. So Doma is capturing context, understand what you're trying to do, capture as much like source material, right? So the more context it has, the deeper the understanding it can sort of establish and in regards to kind of like, what you're trying to do and how you're trying to move that thing forward. Now let's talk about who do you want to invite into your domain in support of what you're trying to do. Now, in the context of like our product experience domain, obviously it's other people on the team, right? Our head of experience and our CTO and other engineers and designers. So Doma then makes it really easy to invite those people in. You can generate a link, you jump in, you authenticate, and all of a sudden now you're in a group chat environment. But here's the sort of the big difference, I think, in terms of like what we have experienced in terms of group chats with humans in the past and what we've experienced in terms of our interactions with AI across all the various different LLMs. So a group chat that has humans and AI in it is fundamentally different because we've designed the AI to basically be a facilitator and a mediator of conversation. The agent or Doma in this context, its job is to help push the conversation forward towards outcomes that could be like meaningful or materially important to the thing that you're working on. So you can be having a back and forth conversation and Doma, the agent, is like, that's very interesting. Cory, there was something you said yesterday. I'd like to bring that back up again because Dan has something that's very similar to that point. So it's always facilitating, it's always moderating. It's the best facilitator, the best moderator, the best mediator that you've ever been in a conversation with because it's basically like unmatched in terms of its ability to remember the conversations. It's unmatched in its ability because we've trained it accordingly to understand how to thread these different conversations. And when there's conflict, when there's misalignment in these different conversations, the AI, again, is trained to resolve that conflict and work through to really, again, help you kind of achieve some sort of important and material outcome. And the last thing to say is, as you're working through the thing, it also then helps you to kind of push the things you're sort of talking about, the perspectives you're sharing. It helps to push all of that downstream into your actual work. So it will integrate with like Google Docs and other kind of platforms and tools that you're using so that you can then output to the things you're actually working on.
Let's talk a little bit about the model that you built, Doma.
Yeah.
on?
So let me give you a little bit of backstory or context. So as you know, I also co-founded a company called On Discourse, and about almost 3 years ago now. But there's a nice kind of origin story to Domain in that regard. So On Discourse is like a private network. It's a membership based. It's made up of C-suite leaders, founders, investors, entrepreneurs who are all sort of navigating the complexities of emerging technology, AI transformation, etc. And over the course of the last few years, we've hosted hundreds of closed door private conversations with these different leaders, developing a very specific methodology and framework for how we facilitate discourse, right? Which basically sort of means how do we think about and design and use provocation as an unlock to perspective? How do we facilitate productive disagreement? And what are the values that we bring to these conversations that can ultimately give people permission to be able to have the hard conversations, right? So, imagine hundreds of those conversations captured, recorded as conversational data. That was what we essentially used to train our first model, like the earliest model, which was really about trying to understand how do we then mine or query this conversational data so that we can then output content, media, insight, perspective, packaged and delivered and presented in whatever way we want, right? That was the beginnings of this, right? And so when it comes to Domain, which we've now spun out as a completely separate company, separate team, separate technology, but what we've trained Doma on, particularly the agent that is trained to be that kind of facilitator of discourse, that mediator and moderator, it's trained on those hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversation that was underpinned by our framework and our methodology of how we facilitate discourse, right? So we now have an agent that is uniquely capable of being able to facilitate a conversation to unlock a new way of thinking about something that is unmatched when you compare having the same conversation on Claude or ChatGPT or in whatever Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, etc.
This might be too reductive, but it reminds me of like when I'm kicking off a project with a cross-functional team and there's like a really good project manager that gets like assigned and you're just like, holy shit, this made it better.
Yeah.
That person is trying to understand what we're all thinking. They're like, they're here to facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
They're keeping us on track. But then it sounds like this is a supercharged AI version, moving it forward in a way beyond what could be possible previously.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, another good example is, we're an early stage startup. We're looking to raise capital. We have a domain that's specific to kind of thinking through that strategy. So how much do we raise? What's the valuation? Should we do like a price round or a safe note? All of these things are kind of critically important for us to figure out as we then go out and start having these investor conversations, right? So we created a domain. We brought some friendly investors in, as well as the other co-founders in the business, to help us answer some of these questions. Now, the experts in the room, right, are incredibly helpful in terms of providing us their opinion, their thoughts, their ideas. And by the way, a lot of people are saying different things. A lot of people are like, this person thinks this person thinks that. Those are two very opposing views, right? Imagine you have that conversation. AI is there to facilitate, to kind of help to moderate and move that conversation forward. And then let's say you're like, okay, I need an opportunity to now sort of step back and reflect on this a little bit. So that's when you go into your private conversation with Doma, right? Now, Doma understands the context of everything that you've been talking about, but Doma also understands the context across all of your domains.
Omniscient.
So you can go one-to-one and be like, okay, Dave was suggesting that we do a price round. Steve was suggesting that we do a safe note. I'm trying to really understand and figure out what is the right way of us moving forward here. What's the
I'm not
right
trying to
strategy?
dilute myself, so you tell me what I should be doing.
And again, the AI is incredibly good. It's like, okay, well, this is what I heard. This is what I see as being the kind of the benefits of doing A versus the benefits of doing B. Here are some things for you to think about, and maybe here are some questions for you to go out to other people to get their opinions. And of course, as we're building domain, as we're starting to think about the private domain, right, that you operate in, where you have these private conversations, we're also building the public domain, where you can now start to push some of these questions out to the public feed, where other people within the domain network can now start to jump in, be like, you know what, we're thinking about price round, this is where we are. Would love to hear other people's thoughts. And now other people external to my domain can now start to contribute to some of these kind of questions, and we can then bring them in as and when is necessary to invite them into the conversation as well, which we think is going to be a hugely important. Like, think about LinkedIn and where you actually mentioned this, that, you know, it's like if Slack and LinkedIn had a baby, that's domain. I wouldn't go as far as to say that exactly, but I kind of like the sentiment, because one of the things that we're trying to fix is it is notoriously difficult to activate and engage your network around the things that you are working on at any given time. Contribution, we believe, is going to be the new currency in work, right? How you contribute, what you contribute to, what is your specific expertise related to your work, but expressed not as performance or promotion, but expressed as your work, I think is going to change the kind of the dynamic of how we communicate, how we share, how we gain recognition as professionals in the future.
Work has become our identity. It's like it means something to us. And, you know, for myself, I think about like, yes, when work feels like disconnected, it's like my identity is being torn apart. Who am I? How do I connect with people? My value, I'm just sort of speaking very macro, but like, I guess, how did we get to this performative place of work? I mean, do you really associate these things together?
I mean, I think what I would associate it with is that we, you know, over an extended period of time, we have put a premium on busy work. We put a premium on doing, put a premium on productivity and efficiency, and we have not put a premium on outcomes. And if we were more outcome orientated in our work, at any level of work, at any level of business, if we put a premium on what is the outcome, not putting a premium on how many hours did you work, how busy are you, how many Zoom calls were you on today? How many emails did you send today? And again, we're trying to sort of push us in that direction, being more outcome orientated, moving from these doing systems to thinking systems, because the more time we can spend being creative, the more time that we can spend using our innate abilities, applying our lived and embodied experience by unlocking human ingenuity, the better the outcome will be ultimately, but the more happier and the more fulfilled we'll be in our work.
Yeah, I'm following you in that it is the process, and that the process itself is the reward, is the outcome, or the outcome you're looking for. Less about, I mean, it's a lot of this is a function of, I mean, the watch, the clock that said like, and now we invented like clocking in and clocking out and like the first industrial revolution. And we don't work that way anymore. We're all working asynchronously, which can be problematic in some ways. You're sleeping when I'm awake, but also that's great. Then you can like catch my thing when you wake up in the morning. It is entirely changed, but we're trying to force people at the same time. You've got like Jamie Dimon building like a gigantic, in pre-COVID, like tower downtown that says like, I've got to get people back into this office, and you have to work at a certain. AI is going to take away all these efficiencies, and I do think we're going to be laid bare on like the thinking. I feel like philosophically you're right on this. I just don't know how these corporations would align around something like this, because they see the outcomes they're looking for. You know, how are they going to move in this kind of direction? Because they're all going like, we've got to get everybody back in the office. People have to work 9 to 5.
I mean, look, I think there's so much truth to the fact that it's important to get people back to the office in the right context, right? So I do think for young people, it's incredibly important that they are not working from home permanently. I think that is very isolating. It's not good for young people as they are developing professionally, as they're just developing and maturing as human beings. You need as much social contact as possible in the early part of your career. The people that struggled the most during COVID, for example, were young people and old people. And why? Because of isolation, because of the problems of isolation, right? I felt very comfortable during COVID because I've spent like 25 years of my career building my network, building those relationships. It's easy for me just to ping someone and say, hey, let's jump on a Zoom and catch up and talk about something and potentially collaborate on something together. We as humans put a premium on this idea that the people we are working with and working together and collaboratively and otherwise is essential and so important to our happiness and fulfillment and our productivity. Yeah. And we sometimes, I think, or oftentimes, I think we forget that as we look at the opportunity to instead spend my days working with ChatGPT, because guess what? It reaffirms how I feel about myself, because it's basically sycophantic and it's never going to tell me that my work sucks. Yeah. Right? It is designed to take me down different rabbit holes in perpetuity or forever. Like just, it wants me to be going deeper and deeper and deeper into this thing. And, and it's outputting answers, right, to my questions that basically feel right, even though they might actually not be. And people, I mean, I just see it every day. People are spending so much time with these AI tools and spending so much less time with other people. And I can't emphasize enough how much of a problem I think that is, for the future of work.
I'm going to do a few lightning round. Mm-hmm. What is one thing leaders need to stop doing immediately?
Leaders need to stop putting a premium on busy work and instead start to think about how do we help our teams, our people, unlock a new level of appreciation for their work by putting a premium on outcomes.
Okay, so then what's one thing leaders should start doing?
Actually, this is important in the context of AI, I suppose, but I'm surrounded by C-suite leaders, some of which are working for like Fortune 100 companies, big jobs, massive teams. And the leaders that are willing to roll their sleeves up, are willing to get in the trenches with their teams to understand what is happening in terms of AI, the leaders that bring a certain amount of empathy to what a lot of people in work are feeling right now, which is fear, right? Which is concern for their jobs. If you can get in the trenches, if you can roll up your sleeves, and I think if you can communicate the message of let's figure this out together, and I see it every day. Those leaders are moving the culture of their organizations forward in ways that most other leaders are not.
My closing question for you, if someone's feeling disconnected from their work, which we've just talked for quite some time about what that feels like, mm-hmm. What's something that they could do? I mean, we can download Domain. Okay. What would you recommend?
It's funny because this is advice I used to give to young people during the pandemic when they were sort of struggling with the sort of the concept and the realities of working from home, is just reach out. Reach out and in the first instance and be unafraid to ask for help. And it could be really straightforward. I'm just drafting this email. I've got to send it to a really important client. Could you just would you mind just taking a look? Give me some feedback. And I'm not talking about to a colleague, reach out to your network, activate your network by whatever means you possibly can. Do not be afraid to ask for help. But here's a really interesting phenomena that I'm seeing right now is that people are embarrassed to ask for help, particularly when they have to ask another human being. But AI now represents this backstop, this capacity to, you know what, I could just ask AI. And I'm not embarrassed because it doesn't judge me. And so people are now defaulting to asking AI the answer to the question and not necessarily reaching out to their network. And, I think that's problematic because at the end of the day, I do care about mental health. I do care about the fact that people are feeling isolated. And I think isolation is really the first step towards a mass deterioration of our mental health. So reach out to another human and ask for help would be my best advice.
I'm glad I reached out to you for this pod. This was a good convo, Toby.
Well, thank you.
I'm excited about what you've got going on for the future of our work here. And look forward to seeing it. It's live. It can be downloaded.
So right now, if you go to ondomain.ai, you can join the waitlist. We're slowly bringing people into the product and starting to get feedback, which is fantastic. We're super excited about the feedback we're getting so far. But yeah, ondomain.ai. You can also read about our sort of like thesis around kind of the collaboration revolution there as well, which I think is sort of a good underpinning to what we're trying to build.
Toby Daniels is CEO and co-founder of new platform Domain. Toby, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.